James Gunn critiques Scorsese's Cape Fear, calling it not great, but appreciates how the remake complements the original. Welcome to Stats In. If you're just joining us, please subscribe and don't forget to turn on notifications bell for more video. James Gunn has always been blunt about his opinions because he's not the kind of person who would hold his words back to please others. The filmmaker has worked on franchises like Guardians of the Galaxy and took on some bold risks. On the other hand, we have Martin Scorsese, who is hailed as one of the best directors. So Gunn making a remark about Scorsese's project could potentially anger a lot of cinephiles. The latter's name commands respect in every corner of the industry, and publicly criticizing his work could open the floodgates to hate comments. James Gunn seems to have complicated opinions about remakes, and he put them forth in a 2001 interview with Fanboy Planet. He spoke about reimagining George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead. Gunn was hesitant, but found that offering a fresh perspective and honoring the original was the right way to create a remake. When the interviewer asked him to elaborate on his words, he gave Cape Fear as an example. What I mean by works with the other movie side by side is simply that hopefully you'll get a fuller picture of my movie by watching both versions, that the second can work to bring out some of the beauty of the first. Scorsese's Cape Fear, though not a great film, works well like that. If you watch both Cape Fears back-to-back, you'll enjoy Scorsese's version, and maybe even the first film. Much more. His film is simultaneously its own story and a commentary on how life has changed in between the two films. Gunn did not mean any disrespect to Scorsese. He simply wanted to hammer in the point that the movie was not as enjoyable on its own, but when paired with the original, the experience becomes even more elevated. But still, it's rare for filmmakers to casually critique someone like the Goodfellas director. The Martin Scorsese directorial Cape Fear had an all-star cast with industry giants like Robert De Niro, Nick Nolte, and Jessica Lange. The movie was all about exploring heavy themes like vengeance, morality, and how fragile family bonds can be at times. The remake was reimagined through the director's unsettling and intense lens, and despite its commercial success, there are critics who share the same sentiment as Gunn. De Niro was praised for playing Max Cady, and even actors like Hugh Jackman took inspiration from this role, but the loud and excessive stylistic choices in the movie did not sit right with everyone. The original was subtle, which is probably what most Scorsese fans expect when they walk into a theater to watch his movie, and like James Gunn, they weren't as pleased with this remake. But there were still some folks who thoroughly enjoyed it, which shows that films labeled as not great by someone can still be of significance to others. Sonequa thrives on her passion for cinema, artistic expression, and philosophical exploration. Every medium of storytelling intrigues her, and she can't help but dissect the layers to unravel the deeper meaning behind an arc or a scene. She finds contentment in playing chess, vibing to background scores, and penning the next chapter of her book. Sonequa is driven by the idea of being a dutiful and responsible human who dedicates herself to a task, regardless of the outcome, a principle she's committed to upholding at Fandom Wire. Prior to helming big-budget superhero flicks, James Gunn faced his biggest challenge in one indie superhero movie. Welcome to Stats In. If you're just joining us, please subscribe, and don't forget to turn on notifications bell for more video. The MCU has a history of hiring relatively unknown directors for its movies, which seemingly reflects the studio's adamancy to control its filmmakers. But this wasn't the case with James Gunn, who was brought on board to helm a movie about Guardians of the Galaxy, which, like Gunn, was relatively unknown in the mainstream landscape. While the scale of the movie was miles above Gunn's indie superhero flick, Super, surprisingly, the director was much more comfortable filming the huge-budget Marvel movie. In contrast to the MCU's alleged controlling approach, James Gunn had total creative freedom under Kevin Feige's leadership from the get-go. Although this might have to do with the Guardians' relatively unknown status in the mainstream landscape, Gunn succeeded in transforming them into household names, thus kickstarting his dominance in the CBM scene. Moreover, the MCU didn't shy away from giving the film a massive budget of $170 million. Still, despite the huge scale of Guardians of the Galaxy, which was uncharted territory for the director up to that point, the challenge was relatively easier than that of Super, which he deemed harrowing for its short window via Collider. We had to do like 50 setups a day, so it was just a harrowing, tough experience. And this is difficult, but it's because it's over such a long period of time. But on a day-to-day basis, it's actually a lot more. Using the word easy is not the greatest thing, but yeah, it's easier because you do have more time for the setups, you have more time for planning. Considering the director has continued to deliver critical and commercial hits with his superhero flicks since then, it's safe to assume that the adequate window for production is responsible for his consistent track record. Under his regime, Gunn is giving writers an adequate window to come up with the best storyline, which isn't surprising given his stature as a writer-director. Moreover, instead of following Marvel's approach, Gunn has been adamant about prioritizing writers, who are set to be the cornerstone of the new DCU, as no project will move forward without a finished script via Collider. There's no set timeline for anything. The one thing that I've tried to make clear to people from the beginning, in the way that I hope we're different, is that everything in DC is going to be based on the writers. Given how he has continued to mold himself to different challenges throughout his career, whether it be Super, Guardians, or the Suicide Squad, one can't help but admire Gunn's perseverance as a filmmaker. James Gunn has decided that his Batman stories in the DCU will be missing one key factor that had been a trend in some of its predecessors. Welcome to Stats In. If you're just joining us, please subscribe and don't forget to turn on notifications bell for more video. There are some things that are going to set the DCU apart from the MCU that fans are pretty familiar with. To begin with, the Marvel Cinematic Universe was dealing with B-tier characters when it was forming the Avengers, and so it was important to show the origin stories of Iron Man, Thor, and Captain America. However, when it comes to characters like Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman, the DC Universe can be forgiven for foregoing their origin stories altogether, given that they are so well known as characters that retreading them would essentially be an extended exercise in maid and butler dialogue. This is something that James Gunn, too, believes, given that he has decided to not go ahead with Batman's origin story as a film in the DCU. Even Christopher Nolan, with his Batman trilogy, decided to retread the origin story of the Bat of Gotham, which might not have been necessary, but it was still a great movie nonetheless. However, Gunn, like Reeves, seems to have a different idea about what the Batman film for the DCU needs to be. When James Gunn first announced Brave and the Bold, it was made clear to the audience that Batman's Robin would be Damian Wayne, which would mean that Batman's first film in the DCU would be far from an origin story. Having Damian Wayne as his Robin would require a lot of Batman's mythology to be in place, such as the League of Assassins and the slew of Robins that Bruce had before Damian. James Gunn's DCU, as is the case with Superman, will probably forego origin stories for popular characters, which would allow the studio to give the universe the Star Wars-esque vibe that it is going for, distinguishing it from the MCU further.